an interdisciplinarily trained ecosystem ecologist. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And right now we have 2 grad students in the lab. We have Sophie, who's finishing up her DA, and then Kevin, who's just starting his master's this year, and then a couple of undergrads, Brian and Brittany, in the lab. And then I have some intrepid lab volunteers who have spent way too much time in the field recently, probably for their liking. And I just wanted to note, up where my picture is in the corner here, you can kind of, if you want to see my talking head while I'm talking, you can stick that there. I've made a little box so that you don't have to move it around to like see figures. So what do we do and who are we? We're an ecosystem ecology lab, which means that we're focused on kind of understanding where materials move through ecosystems and what controls their movement through ecosystems. So things like carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus. And our work, we recognize that these transformations, ecosystems are directly and indirectly affected by society. And we also do a lot of our work in aquatic systems. And so we also think a lot about how hydrology affects ecosystem processes. And so we try to understand these not as disparate entities, but as an integrated social, ecological, hydrological system. So some questions we have going on in the lab right now, we ask, how does urban design interact with biophysical context to affect nutrient and carbon fluxes from urban watersheds? We ask how streamflow intermittence affects ecosystem processes. We've also done some work trying to understand how agricultural stream restoration can affect ecosystem function. And then we've also done some work focused on what are the social processes that actually underlie changes in ecosystem design and therefore function over space and time. So we have kind of a wide range of research topics that we engage in this lab. So one of the newer areas for us is understanding how carbon cycling in streams. So really have only understood over the past 15 or 20 years or so the real magnitude of stream impacts on global carbon cycling. So about half of terrestrial net ecosystem production ends up in streams. And once it's in streams, it can be buried in stream sediments. It can leave streams, go into the atmosphere as CO2 or methane sometimes. And then the remainder can be transported downstream as particulate or dissolved carbon. So understanding kind of where carbon is ending up, kind of which pathways carbon is going through is really important for understanding terrestrial carbon budgets as well as kind of global budgets. And our ability to predict kind of where carbon is moving, which pathways it's going through, really depends on our ability to our understanding of the geological, hydrological, and biological controls on carbon inputs, carbon transformations within the stream, and carbon transport through the stream. So the big challenge here, there's been a lot of work trying to constrain the system. The big challenge here is that our current models are based on perennial reference streams. So what does that mean? Perennial means that streams are flowing all of the time, and reference streams means that there's no human impact. So this is a little bit of a problem. It means we're ignoring a lot of streams. So focusing on perennial streams is a big problem because almost 60% of streams in the continental US and a similar proportion globally are either ephemeral or intermittent, which means they don't flow all the time. And whether or not a stream has flow in it has really important consequences for how carbon is cycled within that stream. So if we want to understand how streams are affecting carbon cycling, we really need to pay attention to variation in carbon cycling across variations in stream flow permanence. Focusing on reference streams is another big blind spot because humans have really big impacts on watersheds. Even urbanization, which has a relatively small footprint in terms of land area, has really big impacts on streams. And so if you look at just the contributing area to any stream across the United States, about 3/4 of streams in the US have some development within their contributing area. And you might imagine that agriculture has a larger impact. And this can really matter because, or I guess what I'm trying to say is the patterns of development here understanding how urbanization affects streams really requires the understanding how different patterns of development are impacting stream systems. So for example, patterns of development in Boston are going to be quite different from patterns of development in Miami, and both of those sets of patterns are going to really differ from what's going on in Salt Lake City. And so understanding the effects of urbanization requires understanding how these patterns of development might have different effects on streams, and also how those patterns of development might interact with things like geology or climate. So, so again, thinking about stream carbon cycling and understanding our global carbon budgets, we really need to understand not just what's going on in reference streams, but also streams that are impacted by humans. So this really sets up a lot of the new work that we have going on in the labs these days. We're really focused on understanding what controls spatial and temporal patterns of organic carbon fluxes and transformations across stream networks. So basically, where is carbon coming from? What is happening to it when it's in the stream, and where is it going? How is it leaving the stream? And we're really focused on these two blind spots in current global carbon cycling. One is looking at stream flow intermittence, and the other urban development. And so I'm going to show you really quickly some results about some work on stream flow intermittence, and then I'll kind of zoom back out and tell you about some new projects that we have starting up. So I've been working in the Gibson Jack watershed, which is about 15-20 minutes from campus. If you haven't gone hiking there, it's a really beautiful place to go hiking. I've been working with Sarah Godsey, who's a hydrologist in the geosciences department, to understand how stream flow intermittence has been affecting ecosystem processes across the stream network. And what we did when we first started working here was just say, what is going on? Is this, we knew that there were some intermittent streams in this watershed, but we weren't really sure where they were. And so we had an undergrad student, Jabril, who went out and had a lot of fun hiking all 14+ kilometers of stream length and mapping where there was flow, where there wasn't flow. And we did this over time so that we knew kind of in these dark blue areas where we always saw flow, in the light blue areas where we saw it periodically go dry, and then orange areas where we never saw flow, but there was definitely channelization. So we've described this system, and then to understand how intermittence might be affecting, we're focusing on dissolved organic carbon, which is a major component of organic carbon fluxes. We did some synoptic sampling during different flow conditions. So we went out in November 2016 when it was quite dry, during May 2017 where we had these high snowmelt flows, and then again in August 2017 during the seasonal flow recession where it had again dried up, and we collected samples. All these black dots are the places where we collected samples. So there were a lot of samples about every 200 meters along the stream. And what did we find? So in May, we had these really high snowmelt flows, and so the water looked pretty similar across, there's a lot less variation in stream chemistry across the network, and we didn't find any effect of site flow permanence, whether or not the site dried up ever or was perennial in terms of dissolved organic carbon concentrations. In August, when the stream had dried quite a bit, we actually saw a difference in carbon concentrations amongst sites that were perennial, that had flow in them all the time versus ones that dried up. And what we think is going on here is that this is reflecting legacy effects of drying, where a history of drying at that site might limit biological communities in the stream bed from being able to produce and transform carbon. And so these sites might actually just have lower in-stream production of dissolved organic carbon. And so we have a couple of new grants to really dig into this a lot more, using more synoptic sampling and also some water quality sensors. So I just want to zoom back out and talk about 4 new projects that we have going on in the lab here, kind of focused on spatiotemporal patterns of stream flow intermittence, and also thinking about interactions between urban design and biophysical context. And these range from local projects. So we have this, a new NSF award with Sarah, where we're looking at more digging into this patterns in Gibson Jack, looking at DOC, wrong way. And then we also have a new NSF F-Score Track 2 award, kind of comparing spatial and temporal patterns of water chemistry, linking that with intermittence across watersheds across the United States. And then locally on the urban side, we have a contract with the city of Pocatello monitoring their stormwater, and Kevin, the new master student in the lab, is going to be looking at stream metabolism within this system. And then we have another NSF award looking at dissolved organic carbon, again, across 5 different watersheds across the U.S., urban watersheds across the U.S. And lots and lots of recruiting happening in the lab right now, so hoping to hire 4 new grad students on these projects and a couple of postdocs. And then starting next summer, we're going to have lots of opportunities for undergrads to work on all these projects in the lab as well. And so if you're interested in getting in touch with me about that, that would be super. We'll have lots of things to do. Thank you so much. Here's some contact info, and yeah, thank you.